Now, here in chapter 19, we have it like this. It says, "Better is the poor that walketh in his integrity than he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool." Believe me, the Lord's forbidden us to call any man a fool, but he has really been using that word, because apparently there are quite a few of them around in the human family. Verse 2, "Also that the soul be without knowledge, it's not good, and he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. The foolishness of man perverteth his way, and his heart fretteth against the Lord." Now, what he's doing here is what he's been doing actually all along in this parallelism by contrast. And here we have a contrast actually between those that are God's children and those that are not. And one is the path of truth, and the other is the path of self-will, and that of the fool, if you please, and also of ignorance. Now, we've heard the old proverb today, "Where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise." Well, that is a false proverb. It's not true. I used to have several officers that seemed to pride themselves in the fact that, well, they would always speak out and say, "Well, that is theological, or that's biblical, and I don't know much about that." Well, I always felt like saying, and I had to bite my lip to keep from saying it, well, why in the world don't you know it? You ought to. A mature man, an officer in the church, and you're that devoid of spiritual understanding. And so here we have this distinction that is made. Here is a nice little saying that the professor sent me. "No man is uneducated who knows the Bible, and no one is truly educated who is ignorant of its teaching." Now, that used to be true, but today they're far from it. I probably should say it like this. Today, this is not accepted as truth. There was a day when it is. I still consider this true. I don't think a man can be truly educated who is ignorant of the Bible. And certainly Christians today ought not to be ignorant of the Bible. The thing that should characterize the child of God, therefore, is one who knows the Word of God. Now we have here in verse 4, "Wealth maketh many friends, but the poor is separated from his neighbor." Now, the wealthy folk, materially, will always have a house full of guests. As long as the ice box is filled and the bar has plenty of bottles on it that are filled, and also there's plenty of music and entertainment and luxury that's around them, they'll have plenty of guests. But the interesting thing is, God says here that the poor man is the one that the child of God should seek out. You remember that James has a great deal to say about that, and I'm afraid that today we are putting a wrong emphasis. I hear so many people say, "Well, you know, we have a millionaire in our church." And how many preachers have told me that? "I have a millionaire in my church." Well, you might be better off without him, by the way. And you remember James, in a very practical way. Now he says, here comes a man into your assembly, he has a gold ring and goodly apparel. There coming also a poor man in vile raiment. And ye have respect to him that weareth the gay clothing, and say unto him, Sit thou here in a good place. Say to the poor, Stand thou there, or sit here under my footstool. And may I say to you that I'm afraid today the poor man has his problems. And we sometimes wonder why there are a lot of folk that don't go to church. You can't get them into church. A couple were telling me they're a poor couple and not able to buy the latest, and what they have looks pretty worn. I've seen them so-called dressed up. They're telling about going to a church that has a reputation of being a very conservative, evangelical church. And you know what happened. They have been snubbed. It's been terrible what happened to them. May I say to you, friends, today, human nature hasn't changed down through the centuries, and I'm afraid that there's a whole lot of old nature that is showing. We used to say, to a woman, your petticoat is showing. My mother used to always ask me when she went out, is my petticoat showing? My wife asked me that today. But there are a lot of folk that are stepping out and go to church, move in society, that is, in their particular group, and their old nature is showing. And it shows in matters like this. God lays it on the line here, doesn't he? He says the poor is separated from his neighbor even. They find out you're a poor boy,